Members of Congress are speaking out about this report in the Washington Post over the weekend about Jared Kushner and his sweet deal with the Saudis. You'll recall that after Khashoggi was murdered, Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist, permanent resident of the United States, he went to the Saudi embassy in Turkey to get his marriage license. And they kidnapped him. Well, they kept him in the embassy, beat him to death apparently, or strangled him. From the audio there's actually audio of his murder out there, and then cut him up into pieces with a bone saw, and then apparently disposed of those pieces in a way that whether it was vats of acid. I mean, nobody knows because they never found his body. It just vanished. And this whole assassination team, including several people very, very close to the Saudi dictator, Mohammed bin Salman, had all flown in specifically for this purpose, apparently, to murder Khashoggi. Well, after that happened, Jared Kushner flew over to Saudi Arabia and said, "Don't worry, we got your back. We'll take care of this." And they did. The Trump administration was like, "Yeah, so what?" In fact, Donald Trump said, "Oh, we kill people too." And so the result of this, and then the other thing was, the Saudis have been running this just brutal war against the Houthi rebels in Yemen, just next door to the south, and blockading their ports, producing mass starvation, murdering civilians, bombing cities, and they've been doing it with American weaponry, with jet planes made in the United States, with precision-guided missiles and bombs manufactured here in the United States, sold to the Saudis, in previous administrations. And so, when the Saudis said, well, we'd like, billions of dollars, I think it was $30 billion more in weapons. Don't quote me on the number, but it's close to that, some substantial amount of new weapons from the United States. Both Democrats and some Republicans said, are you kidding? Let them start behaving like a civilized nation. They're putting women in prison for not wearing their veils. They don't allow women to drive. A woman can't control her own life. She can't have a checking account without the permission of her husband. She literally can't even go out of the house without the permission of her husband. Let them modernize their country. And there was all this whole big PR push of, oh yeah, Mohammed bin Salman is leading a modernization of Saudi Arabia. Not so much. But the guys who went to the defense of the Saudis were Jared Kushner and Donald Trump. And just by coincidence, around that time, Jared Kushner was desperately looking for $1.5 billion to pay off the mortgage on this building that he bought. I mean, the backstory to that is kind of fascinating. When his dad got out of prison and Jared got out of college, his uncle was at their house, and he said, Jared, and his dad agreed with this, and said, Jared, here are the 3 things you need to do to be successful in life. Number 1, you need to buy a big, fancy office building in New York City, in Manhattan, a status symbol. That'll cause people to take you seriously. Number 2, you need to buy a newspaper so you can publish articles about yourself. And number 3, you need to marry a woman who is an heir to a very wealthy family that has credibility in this town that will enhance your credibility, because your dad just got out of prison for being a con man. And so Jared Kushner, within the next year or so, bought 666 Fifth Avenue, paid $500 million more for it than it was worth because he didn't know what he was doing. Bought the New York Observer, an obscure Long Island newspaper that he ran for years and finally ran into the ground, and married Ivanka Trump. So, here's this guy who's a grifter, and then the bill came due on the building. He had the terms on the mortgage were relatively short term, or at least some of them, and he desperately needed cash. And he bought it right before the real estate crash in 2008, the Bush crash. So, by this point, he owns a building. He owed more on the building than it was worth. And so he goes to the Middle East to beg for money. Qatar had this big investment fund. He's begging the Qataris for money. They're saying no. And so Saudi Arabia cuts them off, embargoes them. They can't even get food into Qatar. And which is a big deal because we have, you know, I believe it's the 6th Fleet. We've got an entire fleet of warships and aircraft carriers that are in port in Qatar. I mean, it's our major ally in the region, militarily speaking. And Saudi Arabia and the UAE cut them off until, through a company in Canada, until the Qataris gave Jared Kushner his $1 billion. And then all of a sudden the blockade's over and everything's good. And then, you know, Papa Trump. And then, you know, one day after Jared Kushner leaves the White House, after Trump is no longer president, he opens an investment company, something he's never even run in his life, and goes to the Saudis and says, give me some money. And the investor advisors within Saudi Arabia, their sovereign wealth funds, say, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. This company has no track record. Don't give him any money. And the dictator, MBS, comes in and says, no, we're going to give him $2 billion. And out of that $2 billion, he can pay himself $25 million a year for the rest of his life, which is what he's doing right now. That's Jared. Then Donald comes along and says, hey, you gave my son-in-law $2 billion. What about me? And so the Saudis say, oh, yeah, okay, well, we'll create this golf tour, the Live Golf Tour, and we can do it on Trump properties. And nobody knows to this day how many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars the Saudis have given Donald so far to legitimize and host these golf tours. But what we do know is that they now are putting together a $4 billion Trump hotel program for the Middle East. I mean, you know, Donald and Ivanka and Jared and Don Jr. and Eric, you know, the whole nepotism family, this whole bunch of nepo babies, they're set for life with Saudi money and Qatari and UAE money. So now members of Congress, specifically Senator Ben Cardin, who's a Democrat from Maryland, he said, we should be looking into this. He said, quote, in President Trump's administration, we had an unprecedented abuse of power in so many different ways. It's something that should be looked at. He went on to say, this isn't just business as usual because we disagree with the president. This is taking the office to a whole new level. And this is what happened. Donald Trump, well, during the primary, he said, I'll be the first president to make money off being a president. And sure enough, he's apparently, certainly he and his son-in-law have made billions of dollars off his having been president, and he continues to. Not to mention the hundreds of millions of dollars that he continues to raise in his fundraising attempts, which is the only reason he's running for president in 2024. He knows there's not a chance in hell he's going to win, but he can sure raise a hell of a lot of money. When they asked, when Ross Story was reporting on this, they asked John Cornyn about Jared Kushner. And he said, I thought Mr. Kushner played a really significant role. He's been a force for good in the Middle East. Right. Mazie Hirono, the senator from Hawaii, said it's clear that the House Oversight Republicans are a joke and that their approach to investigating corruption in government is exclusive to investigating Democrats. And she said about Kushner, this raises a lot of questions. I'd like to see the legal issues about Trump move forward. Gary Peters, the senator from Michigan, told Ross Story that the Kushner deal should be looked into. Oh, I said Kushner was making $25 million annually off his investment fund. Turns out it's $20 million. I misspoke. So what's going to happen with this? Well, who knows? Who knows? Something, hopefully, will happen. I mean, hopefully the Democrats will be looking into this. They should have been doing it for the last 2 years that they controlled Congress. There should have been a congressional investigation into the monetization of the White House by Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. And the fact that there wasn't is something that I will never be able to understand or explain.